Hello and welcome to this town hall, very important town hall on transcendental meditation and veterans, and looking at the actually almost 40, 50 years of experience of bringing transcendental meditation to active duty personnel and veterans in America. And today we're going to be looking at the research studies that are going on, and so the clinical research and the applications of TM for veterans. And this comes at a time, just before we began, I was just perusing the web, and I'm going to share these points. And when I read it, it just lit me on fire. A 2021 study by Brown University estimated that 30,177 veterans of post 9/11 conflicts had died by suicide. When compared to the 7,000 personnel killed in conflicts, that's at least 4 times as many veterans died by suicide than personnel killed during post 9/11 conflicts. And listen to this. A study released in 2022 and written up in Military Times found that as many as 44 veterans die on average per day from suicide when accounting overlooked causes of death that are aligned with suicidal and self-harm behavior. Could be alcoholism, drug abuse, which is 2.4 times greater than the official estimate. We talked about 21 to none, David Lynch Foundation and our Center for Resilience, 21 veterans taking their lives every day. And the outrage is that the veterans, they're talking, well, it wasn't 21, it's really just 18 or whatever, 44. So our discussion today is no longer, sort of a, oh, this is an interesting idea, meditation for veterans. It's an absolute urgent need of the time. This is a national shame. So what I'd like to do now is just go right to a 3-minute video, because I want to go right to our discussion. We have some amazing guests here with us today. 3-minute video that highlights some of the work that we've been doing, and it talks with veterans, and George Stephanopoulos, who's as most of you know, he's a ABC news anchor, and he hosts this little 3-minute video. So let's just watch that. He talks about 21 to none. This was done about a year and a half ago, this video, but now replace that with 44.
Last month we celebrated Veterans Day to honor the brave men and women who've risked their lives, many given their lives to safeguard ours. But as a nation, we have to do more than honor. Far too many veterans are having a difficult time adjusting to life, even surviving when they return home. Here's a stunning statistic. About 21 veterans take their own lives, commit suicide every day in this country. During the pandemic, the numbers are only increasing. And there's a large body of very compelling research published in top medical journals that shows TM is highly effective in reducing the symptoms of PTSD, anxiety, depression, thoughts of suicide among veterans. Let's take a look.
You do not go over there without leaving a piece of yourself.
It was like, you're broken, and we're going to give you this medication, and that will control you for the rest of your life.
I was taking 15 medications, over 60 pills a day, and none of it was working.
I wished I had died in Iraq. That was the first thought of my day.
And I put a loaded pistol to my head, and I was going to kill myself.
The first time I did transcendental meditation, I felt like a rock had just been lifted off of me.
I could breathe, I could think, and I didn't have this anger inside of me all the time.
And I was able to get my peace of mind back. My life just changed instantly.
Don't wait till it's too late. I almost did.
And if you don't want to do it for yourself, do it for the people that love you, because they deserve it. I finally found what fit for me, and it was TM, and it changed everything.
when the transcendental meditation becomes part of the daily practice of the men and women in our military, it'll make a huge difference. It's life changer.
So I'm about to introduce you, Major General Spidermark. So if you could come online. Our first panelist is U.S. Army Major General, retired, and current military analyst for CNN, James Spidermarks, a very dear friend, and he's a longtime practitioner of transcendental meditation and the national chair of our 21 to none, should be now 44 to none. General Marks, tell me your thoughts when you saw that, heard that number.
Well, it's incredibly tragic, and it's unacceptable. And I lack the eloquence to describe how upset I am with the inability of our Veterans Administration to acknowledge this challenge, get its arms around this challenge in an amazingly holistic way, and to really facilitate the transition into the service, in service, and then from service back to the communities. And I am a firm believer that TM works. I did not do transcendental meditation. I was not accustomed to it. I was not introduced to it until after I had retired from service. And Bobby, it is a life changer. It truly is, as you've described it. It's taking care of yourself from the neck up. In the military, as we know, there is this ethos of self-care, being a part of the team, trying to put your baggage and your detritus to the side and just moving forward in a focused manner. What you realize is TM allows you very effectively to lift all that to the side, and you're more focused, you're more at peace with yourself. TM is the warrior's meditation. Its history, its lineage is to the warrior preparing him or herself for battle. So those are my initial thoughts, Bob.
It's interesting you bring this point out that some people think, oh, meditation, what does it have to do with, military? Well, it turns out that you go back 3, 4, 5,000 years ago, or that transcendental meditation was practiced by the warrior classes, because you can't fight out of anger, revenge, fear, fatigue, any of those things. You have to have an inner equanimity and then an outer power and focus. Thoughts on that?
Beautifully said. The military is all about task, things we must do, and purpose, why we were asked and demanded to do those things. And so when you embrace the larger purpose, and TM helps you get your arms around your place within that larger purpose, you are at peace in an amazingly chaotic, turbulent, immensely dangerous world. TM helps you do that.
Final question, and then I'll come back to you later. This has become quite personal for you, and you're sharing this personal experience. Would you like to share that with?
I will, Bobby. Very, very difficult. One of my daughters was married to a soldier, an incredibly gifted young officer, 2 very hard combat tours in Iraq as a leader and as a commander. And he took his life last year. Once he departed service from nation, I think he lost his path. He lost his azimuth, and that sense of purpose that we all must have was gone. And God bless my daughter and their children. They tried desperately to try to keep him on that path, but it was insufficient. So it is very, very personal, very personal.
And so how would you, so I do have one last question, and thank you for your courage to share that. Why would you say then, in a nutshell, why we need to bring this? Why are you so dedicated to bringing TM to veterans? And there could be many veterans on this watching and listening to this today, what would your message to them be?
TM works. It requires nothing other than your acknowledgement that you are vulnerable. And even senior leaders have to acknowledge their vulnerability and their inherent weaknesses and their societal and contextual weaknesses. And then TM is a way for you to move all that aside and to center yourself among the inevitable chaos that's around you. And let's be frank, the pandemic has taught us most recently that chaos is a part of our lives. We have to be able to embrace that. What better way to embrace that when you're centered and you're confident in yourself within this environment?
Thank you very much. I can't say thank you enough to you, General Marks. You're such a dear friend, such an inspiration to me and so many people. And so thank you.
Bobby, thank you very much.
I want everybody to know that General Marks and my mother called me Bobby. So, and I'm honored. So our next panelist and a very cherished and respected colleague of mine is Vin De Crescenzo, who's the Senior Director of Programs and Outreach for the David Lynch Foundation. And he has been very instrumental in bringing transcendental meditation to veterans. And I have a couple of questions for you, Vin, and then we're going to share some interviews together with some of our other panelists. So there is a study that's now underway looking at transcendental meditation for veterans and first responders and its effectiveness for PTS and suicidality and insomnia. Could you talk about that study?
Sure. Well, first, I'm most happy to do this with you, Bob. You know, both you and General Marks are a real inspiration. And as much as we have a passion to do this, I wish we didn't have to. It's really, as you said, a tragedy that this situation exists. But there is good news, is that we do have an intervention that works. And you mentioned it earlier. There's 50 years of great research on TM as a medical intervention for stress-related disorders like post-traumatic stress. A few years ago, the Department of Defense funded a study at the San Diego VA, which a few folks listening may be familiar with, that demonstrated TM to be a highly effective intervention for veterans with post-traumatic stress. And off of that, and this was really through your leadership, Bob, we set out to fund the largest study ever conducted on veterans, first responders with PTS and meditation. And it was delayed a bit because of pandemic. As people who are listening may know, TM is an intervention that's done in person. So we had some issues there. But once we were able to go back and work directly in person with veterans, we were able to launch this historic study about 6 months ago. So we're 6 months in, and we have 4 out of our 6 sites around the country that have been launched. And then the next couple should be coming on board in the next few months. And those sites are both in New York and in California.
And what is it exactly that the researchers are looking at?
Yeah, so they're looking for a number of different things. As you mentioned, and I'm not a scientist, so I won't give you all the specific instruments, but they use a number of different validated instruments to measure symptoms of post-traumatic stress, depression, insomnia, substance use, and a few other related issues as well. And they're comparing 2 things. It's a randomized control trial, so half of the subjects will be receiving transcendental meditation, and the other half will be receiving another intervention called present-centered therapy. So what's interesting about this is that both of them are what they refer to as non-trauma focused. So, you know, a lot of veterans don't necessarily particularly want to go into their trauma, speak about the trauma. So what's nice about both of these interventions is neither of them really require that. There's no talking about or reliving old trauma. They're just focusing on right now what's going on with present-centered therapy, and certainly with TM is just a kind of a self-care practice, as we know, that veterans can do for themselves. And what we've seen in our programs is how well they've responded to that, because it is self-care, because it is self-reliance. It really fits very well with the military culture.
And so I just want to make this point, because a person could be watching this and be skeptical and say, well, you know, I mean, have you tested this over time? Have many veterans learned this? The data, is this research being done by independent, investigators? So if you could comment on that.
Sure. Well, there's two things that we really set out, and this was really from you, Bob, setting a goal for us. We try to do two things, which is one is to help veterans today, right? So for a number of years, we've been running direct programs at VA hospitals, military bases, working with other veteran serving organizations to bring it directly to veterans now. But at the same time, we know as a small nonprofit, we can only really bring this to the thousands of veterans. But in order to bring it to millions that need it, we've got to work with top universities and researchers and finish this research so that we can then leverage it for long-term coverage and funding. So that's exactly what we're doing. We're working with some of the top PTSD researchers in the country, Dr. Rachel Yehuda from Mount Sinai. We're working with folks from Stanford and a number of other places.
Great. So let's pivot now, and if that's okay, and you and I are going to have a nice conversation with Lisa Beatha. Lisa is a U.S. Army veteran and Director of Veterans Affairs for the City University of New York. So I'll ask the first question and then turn it over to you, Vin. What are the mental health issues that veterans who are transitioning from military to higher education specifically are facing? It's one thing to go, the stress of just coming back home, but now to their families, but now they're actually going to college. So what are the mental health issues you see that these veterans are facing?
It's learning to reacclimate. They're going into an entirely different type of environment, as in higher ed. Higher ed is known to have so many acronyms, more so as the military, but they're not familiar with these acronyms. What do prerequisites mean? What does it mean to go, what retention means, the registration? There's so many quirks and acronyms to the system. But it's also a bit of chaos. On some campuses, you have over 10,000 students in some cases in public universities, or even the way the classroom is structured. For example, in the military, you wait until you're called upon. Students sometimes come to class 15 minutes late or leave in between class. That type of chaos and frustrations are what may impact a student in higher ed. Also, it's unconscious biases. When you're in the military, you're in a uniform. You may be waiting for your class to begin and someone speaks about the military or an issue that's happening about a war that just took place. So these are things that may trigger a veteran. And these are issues that cause high stress. And the fact that veterans, because they're so mission driven, they're accustomed to succeeding. There's that fear of failure. So when something new comes up and they're afraid to speak up about it, it becomes what I call a level 10 problem. And that creates its own anxiety for veterans on a campus.
Yeah, it's tough enough for a kid to go to college for the first year, just going to college, and it's disorienting. But imagine coming from military, from combat or just active duty to that situation. And you're right, simple little things to me, like not understanding the phraseology can make a person, and these acronyms can make a person feel out on the outskirts looking in, and very disorienting. So Vin?
Yeah, well, first, Lisa, we've been working with you for so many years, and, you've always been one of our favorite partners. And something that always occurred to me is that so many folks go into the military looking for money towards a higher education when they come out. It's really like a sacred promise that we make to them as a nation to fulfill. And you're there to do that for them. So first of all, thank you for doing that, because it's so important. And we know, as Bob was saying, to make that transition from military to civilian, but then when you add becoming into higher education, it can be so complex, and they have you to look after them. And we always appreciated about the work that you've done. As well, we've been able to partner so well together for years. I want to go back a little bit for you. I know that it's been a while now, many years that we've been working together. tell us a little bit about your own experience with transcendental meditation.
For me, transcendental meditation, TM, is more or less a lifesaver. I was going through extreme anxiety, stress, depression, insomnia, because I was dealing with a personal crisis. It wasn't military related. Losing my daughter in 2016 was extremely traumatic. And another veteran happened to mention TM. And just going through my first day or two of TM, I was able to sleep for the first time in a year and a half. So that's my experience with TM, that it saved my life because I felt that I was literally going crazy. I just couldn't function.
Amazing. Well, thank you. Well, I guess the last thing I'd just like to ask you, and thank you for sharing that, is, it's our long-term goal to try to make this available, certainly to the veterans that you work with at CUNY in New York, but really to all veterans who need it around the country, by making it something that's covered through insurance or that's covered through VA. What are your kind of thoughts about that?
I think it's extremely needed. I just mentioned a personal crisis, but during last year, I happened to get into an accident. So I was dealing with what some of my veterans deal with, a health issue. I had to literally relearn to walk because I tore my Achilles. So there was so much stress in just getting to PT, physical therapy. There was a lot of anxiety about co-pays and how to manage and navigate, not just working remotely, but dealing with other things, work-life balance. So not having to worry about TM being a part of your network would be amazing. Again, it's beyond a lifesaver. It was able to help me reclaim my life when it came to physically walking again, and also just being able to decompress. I mean, last year, everyone was beginning to step outside and I'm trapped inside. So that was a whole other mental stressor. But having it readily available, even from I would say, as veterans are about to leave the military, would be helpful, as well as having that accessible to them medically.
Perfect.
Before we transition, Vin, I'd like to see if General Marks has any comments on Lisa's thoughts.
Yeah, Lisa, your openness about this is really, really appreciated. So thank you for that. The thing that I've realized about service members, and in your experience specifically in academics, is that it's very easy for service members departing a very disciplined life to get lost when there aren't boundaries that are clearly defined. And so the world truly is wide open. And in many cases, that embarrassment of riches, if you will, becomes an immense challenge. And the lack of external discipline then requires the service member to exercise an immense amount of personal discipline. And that's where things can often get off kilter. So I really appreciate the way what you've described in terms of that very specific journey of service members. Thank you.
So Vin, you want to introduce Danielle?
Sure. So we're fortunate today to have as our final panelist here, Danielle, who is a long-term transcendental meditation instructor. And she has been working with combat veterans at Boulder Crest retreats around the country for a number of years now. And I have to say, Danielle, it's always a pleasure to see you. We're sorry that we don't get to work with you more. We were just saying, we've got to get you back to New York to teach here some more, but I know how passionate you are about Boulder Crest. Every teacher that I've spoken to that's taught at these combat, retreats for combat veterans tells me the same thing. This is one of the best experiences they've ever had in their life. Tell me why these retreats are so special.
Thank you for having me. I think that every teacher has the same experience because the Warrior Path program that Boulder Crest Foundation created is a truly phenomenal program. PATH stands for Progressive Alternative Training for Helping Heroes. And that it's really a comprehensive training based on the science of post-traumatic growth. This idea that the deep struggle that warriors have experienced can be the catalyst for transformation into profound strength and creating a life of thriving. And TM is what they call one of the cornerstones of the program. It's the cornerstone self-regulation practice that's taught as part of a really comprehensive program in which I feel really lucky to be one of the few civilians that gets to be part of and witness on a regular basis, and truly see from day 1 to 7 people coming back to life. People who often walk in on day 1 with plans to take their own lives, if this is the last resort, and leaving with a renewed sense of hope and purpose.
And are there any particular populations that you've noticed that you've worked with that respond to it? Have you done any retreats with just women veterans or military families, or anyone special that you wanted to share?
All of the programs in Boulder Crest are either all women or all men. So I've definitely worked, with both. And I'd say when I heard Lisa talking about the physical health challenge, that's one thing that's been coming up quite frequently lately. And a couple of people's stories that come to mind in relation to that, I'd love to share. One was in a male retreat, and he had been, every kind of chronic pain, all the medications, diagnosed for, it's been decades at that point. And after one day of practicing TM, felt such relief from the physical pain that he said, if I had been given this by the VA 20 years ago, it would have saved, rather than opioids, it would have saved me from addiction and all of the challenges that he dealt with as a result of that. And that really stood out to me as, that in a day of starting this practice, felt such tremendous relief that he realized he could have saved decades of his life from opioid addiction. That was one that really jumped out. And then a more recent one, and this was a female veteran who came through, and she was not in a Warrior Path program. She was just learning TM and had not slept, dealt with nightmares, experienced military sexual trauma, had been medically retired after 17 years in the military because of lupus and the chronic pain that she experienced from that. And after, again, just a day or two of meditating, came in saying she was sleeping through the night. The nightmares had virtually disappeared. And the thing that I think it was about 3 weeks later, she went for her regular medical scans for lupus and her treating of that. And her inflammation, the blood levels that show that lupus inflammation had gone from 35 to 6. She said her rheumatologist was floored, and she teared up, and that her inflammation levels had never been that low since she'd been diagnosed with this. And you just can't argue with the reduction. And she had experienced it, in the reduction of pain from day 1 of meditating, that she said her pain was virtually gone. And then to have the blood levels reflect that she was really floored. And she said, I'm afraid to stop meditating. This has saved my life.
Can I say something, Vin? For a person just watching this may think, whoa, this is like crazy. How can a person be meditating a day or two and have all these dramatic changes take place? And the reason that TM is so widely used now and adopted by veterans, and actually veterans and business and regular folk, and the David Lynch Foundation works with school teachers and frontline healthcare workers, is because there's 400 scientific research studies that have been published on the mental and physical health benefits of transcendental meditation over the past 50 years. And this is independent studies published in peer-reviewed journals. And basically what it shows is that 20-minute practice, twice a day practice of TM during that process of the mind, active mind, just settling down, calming down, experiencing quieter levels that exists already within every human being, just accessing them. Then you see things like a state of rest, in many regards, physical rest deeper than the deepest part of deep sleep. You see a 30 to 40% reduction in cortisol levels. Cortisol is a stress hormone and is implicated in really almost innumerable stress-related disorders, including depression, anxiety, insomnia, inflammation, all these different problems, and as well as substance use disorder and suicidality. So you see this, across the board, significant reductions in stress and improvements in health and resilience that you don't see with anything else. And when we're talking about bringing transcendental meditation to veterans, we're not talking about this is the one solution to all problems. We are talking about their need for an integrated approach for health and healing, for turning post-traumatic stress into post-traumatic growth, as I know Path likes to talk about. But at the cornerstone of that is a tool of meditation. So you do need therapy, you do often need medication, and you do need exercise, you do need these things. But what's missing, because all those things have been available, and there's still 44 veterans taking their lives every day. They're available. Not every veteran takes advantage of it because veterans don't want to be stigmatized by saying I have PTSD, or because these other things aren't effective. And the one last thing that I want to say is a great deal of credit for this program goes to Ed Schloman, who is a Vietnam War veteran, and his compatriot, Jerry Yellen, who is a World War II vet. The two of them back in 2010 started Operation Warrior Wellness, which has now turned into 21 to None. And now Ed partners with the David Lynch Foundation. He has an Operation Warrior Shield. So great appreciation to them. And also to Dusty Baxley, who brought transcendental meditation to Boulder Crest and has been absolutely instrumental in bringing the meditation. He's an Army Ranger veteran and has been through, had his own huge stresses. So I just want to make that point. I know we're running a little bit out of time and I talked a little too much there. Vin, any comments before we go around and hear final comments from everybody?
Well, I would just like to add to what you just say, and a lot of credit goes to yourself, Bob. I've heard you talk many times about being a little boy and having your father take you to visit his patients at VA hospitals. So I know that you've been doing this work pretty much your entire life. And as I was looking around today and seeing all of us on here, we could not do this without our partners like Lisa, without our partners like General Marks, our teachers, of course. We can't do anything without teachers. And certainly our supporters who support us around the country. It really just takes a lot of people who care and who are motivated to do this. And so we're going to be at it as long as it's needed. So
yes, and we are doing this large-scale study with the veterans in order to secure reimbursement, government funding from the VA, from the DOD, from private insurance companies. There may be 1 million veterans who have suffered from post-traumatic stress. There's an estimated 13 million Americans, including frontline healthcare workers and first responders like police and firefighters who we're working with. The idea is to have the meditation covered by these private and public insurers so that any person who suffers from PTS can learn transcendental meditation at no cost, because we have been doing these programs through the generosity of so many really American heroes who helped to underwrite the study and are also funding the work that we're doing at Boulder Crest and at VA hospitals all over the country. So Miss Beatha, do you have anything you would like to say to conclude?
Sure. Any veteran considering TM, to just think about it as adding something to your toolbox. This is an addition to your toolbox, because I've been a proponent of diet and exercise, and this made the world of difference to me.
Beautiful. Danielle?
The thing that I've come to so love and appreciate about the military and first responder community is the service-oriented hearts and that nature to serve others and to serve a cause greater than themselves. And often in doing that, serving themselves, and then their own health and well-being gets left behind, gets lost. And so what I see as TM is just a foundational practice for taking time to take care of yourself so that you can be of the greatest service to others, because we know that's your nature and we know that's, you know, what's most important to you in your lives. And it's not selfish to take time to take care of yourself. In fact, it's the most important thing you can do to be of greatest service.
And Vin, I'm saving General Marks for last.
Well, I'll say something because it struck me what General Marks had to say so much, and a little choked up thinking about it. But we know that it's not just the soldiers and sailors that serve, but it's the entire military family. I saw that. I married into a military family, and I saw what happened. We had 2 deployments at once, and it's the parents, the grandparents, the siblings, the kids that are all dealing with the stress and serving together. And even, we work with a very small nonprofit that helps serve families that tragically lost a vet to suicide. So even those families I want to think about today as well. We've been teaching TM to some of those spouses who survived and the children of those families. So, whenever possible, we really want to serve not just the veterans, but the military families as well, because they all really serve together.
Thank you. And thank you for your work on this. General Marks.
Bobby, Vin, Donnell, and Lisa, thank you so much for what you all do routinely. But this is passionate to me. There's been a Marks in uniform for over 100 years. It's a family business. This makes that family business not only intrinsically worthwhile, but it gives us, as Lisa so well said, it's another tool that we can use quite effectively to help navigate the notion of service selflessly. So thank you so much for allowing me to be a part of this, Bobby. It's a real honor. Thank you.
Well, thank all of you. And I opened this town hall with some statistics, which I want to revisit in case some of you came late. And this study was released in 2022 and published in Military Times, found that as many as 44 veterans die on average every day from suicide, when you account for overlooked causes of death that are aligned with suicidal and self-harm behavior, which is 2.4 times greater than the official estimate. 2.4, the official estimate, 2.4 times greater. This is a national shame. This is a national crime. This is a terrible karma for the country to allow this to happen to our men and women who go off and serve us. And so really appreciate those of you who have connected for this call. If you know of veterans who are on that, who are suffering from post-traumatic stress, suffering from anxiety, depression, substance use disorder, any of these things, Vin, is there an email that they can?
Sure, they can reach out to us at veterans@davidlynchfoundation.org if they were interested in TM or want to participate in a research study, and we'll be happy to point them in the right direction.
And we are David Lynch Foundation, and the Center for Resilience is launched an initiative called Meditate America. And the purpose of Meditate America is, again, to educate the American people about the health benefits of evidence-based meditation practices. At the forefront is transcendental meditation, but any evidence-based meditation practice, so people can make informed decisions about the benefits about alternative approaches, that there is hope, and not just hope that's flimsy hope, but solid hope, a way forward out of the darkness of anxiety and depression and post-traumatic stress. So at the forefront of that is our work to have veterans and first responders who be able to have TM reimbursed by their insurance companies, but ultimately it's to have transcendental meditation available as a health intervention to the 300 million Americans more who now are at risk for stress and stress-related disorders. So it is a privilege for all of us to be talking to those of you on this call. It is an unbelievable privilege. Vin was correct. My father was a World War II veteran. He was a doctor on the front lines in Europe, never said a word. What he must have seen, Miss Beatha and General Marks, was never said a word about it. Those days you couldn't say anything, but he suffered from great pain from war injuries. And he was a radiologist at the VA hospital in San Francisco. And I remember he would come into my room on a Saturday morning and say, Bobby, see General Marks, Bobby, I'm going to take you to see Willie Mays and the San Francisco Giants at Candlestick Park. But before, I'm just going to stop at Fort Miley, the VA hospital, for just a minute. I'm just going to read one x-ray and then we're going to go on. And that would be, I get there at 11 o'clock and it would be one emergency after another, after another, after another. And we often missed the games. And I sat there and this 10, 11-year-old kid sat there in the corridor, and these Korean War and World War II vets rolled by in their wheelchairs with this vacant look in their eyes. And I remember even as a young boy being profoundly struck by their service and their suffering. And so to be able to work with all of you on this call and everyone at the David Lynch Foundation and all the partners that we have is profoundly moving to me. So thank you all very much. For more information, Vin, they can go to what's our webpage?
Well, if you're interested in the study, you can go to ptsresearch.org, or you could go to resilientwarriors.org.
Say it again.
So you go to ptsresearch.org or resilient-warriors.org.
So again, thank you. And thank you, Chris Bush, for organizing this, doing such great work to organize this. And Mike Perez, you're a hero, our IT guy for all things David Lynch Foundation. So have a good rest of your day or evening. And at 6 o'clock Eastern time, I'm going to lead our usual group meditation. You all should have that URL. And if you're interested in finding out about that, you can go to Vin and at the volunteers, and Vin can tell you how to do that. So 6 o'clock. So looking forward to meditating together, and Miss Beatha and General Marks and Miss Freeberg and Mr. De Crescenza. Thank you all very much for joining, and take care.
Thanks, Bob.
Bye.